Hi, I'm Kristen, and this is part two in my series about the modern spiritualist church. Today I'll be talking about mediumship and how that is addressed within the church, how mediumship classes are carried out, little tips and tricks and pieces of advice that are kind of given by ministers and given by mediums that come to the church or have been taking classes within the church. So to get right into it, I began taking mediumship classes pretty quickly after I became a member of the Spiritualist church that I was attending in New England. And the mediumship classes were taught by the minister at the time. And he started off the first lesson by talking about kind of the history of the religion. So, spiritualism as a religion, and rather than just kind of a pastime that was happening back in the 1800s, it was mostly started by the Fox Sisters of New York. So this is a group of three sisters in about the mid 1800s that moved into a haunted house, and they started receiving rappings and answers to their questions based on rapping. As time went on, they got more and more notoriety for this kind of activity that was happening within their home, and they started putting on public demonstrations. And so when they would go and sit in front of an entire group of people that were all essentially strangers, they would ask questions and hear rapping. But as time went on, it became clear to people that the sisters themselves were making up certain communications. And I believe that one of the sisters spoke out about how like they felt like there was a pressure on them to kind of deliver and not kind of have a full house of people watching them in a public space without having something happen. But for all intents and purposes, it seems like the original activity that was happening within the Fox home was legitimate spirit activity, and they were interacting with a deceased person that I believe was somehow tied to a murder within that house. And so, from that start of spiritualism in the mid 1800s, the minister would talk about then Lilydale, New York, which was a major spiritualist town that was formed in the late 1800s, I believe. And so in Lilydale right now, I believe there's about 40 mediums that live there, and there's thousands of visitors that go there every summer for readings and different activities, more mediumship classes. And it's kind of the spiritualist hub of America that still exists today outside of the actual individual churches that are in existence. So after we kind of got all of that history about spiritualism out of the way, then the minister was talking about the difference between psychic gifts versus mediumship gifts. And he described it as a psychic person being somebody that kind of pulls the energy from the person near them or the person that they're focusing on. So he would say, like, if you were sitting in front of somebody in a room or on the phone with somebody, you can kind of magnetically pull in this energy from them and be able to read them. So you might know things that are going on in their life, or you might know things that will be happening to them in the future just because it's within their own energy, the energy of their higher self or their oversoul, if you would like to put it that way. But it wouldn't be an actual communication that's being given to somebody from spirit or from divine intelligence or anything like that. And so the minister kind of said, like, if you are receiving a message from spirit, it will feel different. It won't feel like you're pulling an energy directly from somebody. It will seem like the information is coming into you telepathically, either clairvoyantly or through claircognizance, clairaudience in some cases. But it will be something where it feels like you're making your mind blank, or you're opening up your mind and information is being dropped in. And at that point you might see somebody, and you can describe them to the person that you're partnering with, or that you're meeting with, or that you're giving a reading to. And they might say, oh, well, the person that you are describing, that looks like my deceased friend or my deceased relative, or what have you. And so we started the mediumship classes by being paired up with other people, and we would kind of do these exercises of psychic versus mediumship, psychic versus mediumship. And so, I mean, obviously it's quite easy to read subtle cues on people's faces or in their demeanor, and determine if somebody's having a good day or a bad day, or if you know anything about the person, like what might be causing it. So with psychic training, there was kind of a desire to move past what's clearly on the surface and how the person is feeling that day into trying to get other types of information that you wouldn't know about. And so you'd kind of pull or push your energy into somebody else and see if anything would then come up in your mind that could be relevant. And a lot of times, a lot of the people that were in the mediumship classes with me, they were able to psychically receive information about the person that they were paired up with. And then we instead moved into a mediumship kind of mindset. And so at that point, we would sit in a darkened room, all close our eyes at the same time, and we would raise our vibration. So again, we would breathe in light, we would breathe out any kind of darkness. So breathe in through the nose light and feel it kind of filling your whole body, going through your body, and then you breathe out any kind of yucky dark smoke, or you could even envision like dark goo or something coming out of your mouth or your nose when you're breathing out. And when you felt like there's kind of this higher energy, positive vibration to you, at that point you open your mind just to whatever will be coming through, and explicitly intending to receive a message from spirit. So I remember one of the first activities that we had related to mediumship wasn't connecting to another person in the room. It was rather connecting to another person who might be coming to us. And so during one of those first sessions, I was opening my mind to a spirit coming to me in a guided meditation on a bench. And so the minister who was leading the class, he said, like, imagine yourself sitting anywhere that you consider to be beautiful, like sitting in a chair on a beach or sitting on a bench in the woods, or just anywhere that you can imagine that would be a really pretty place. And he said, open your mind to waiting for somebody to come in to talk to you. It could be a guide, it could be somebody's deceased relative, it could be one of your deceased relatives, it could be anybody, just whoever wants to talk to you. And I remember I was sitting on a bench, and I can't clearly remember what the surroundings were at this time after all these years since I did this exercise. But I remember feeling somebody coming up behind me on the right side of me and walking up. And it was somebody that appeared to be a Buddhist monk, I believe. It was an Asian looking man, bald. He had a long white robe on with his arms exposed. And across him, he had this big golden yellow sash that went from one shoulder down across his torso. And there was nothing communicated at that point. He just kind of appeared and smiled at me, and then he was gone. And I believe to this day that he was probably a guide. Either he is still a guide for me today, or he was a guide at least at that time, because there was another time that I was laying down to go to sleep, and I had a flash in my head of the same man dressed in the exact same long robe with this big golden, deep yellow, beautiful satin shining looking sash, except he was standing out in the middle of like a suburban street looking at me. And so I could see the houses behind him, and it was like a super bright, super sunny day. And again, it was almost like this man had like sunlight radiating out of him that was exploding out through the whole neighborhood. And again, just smiling and just showing me that he was there. So that was really beautiful and really nice. So after we had done that type of exercise, we moved on to reading the other people in the room. And so we would be paired up with somebody specifically that was looking to hear from somebody. So there would be, let's say, somebody's deceased husband would be coming through. As I mentioned, that like there might be a visual given, and so I might see a man with a large beard, or whatever the case may be. I would just see a visual of somebody. And then it would turn into kind of like little snippets of things about their life that would come through. So in one particular case, I remember an older woman coming through for somebody in my class, and she was heavy set, and she had a long skirt down to the ground that seemed to be made out of twill, and she was hunched over, and she had a basket, and she was like picking something on low bushes. And so the man that I was giving this message to, I think he said that sounded like his grandmother, his aunt, or something like that. But he said that she always wore the exact outfit that I saw her wearing, the color skirt that I saw, and the type of garden that she grew, it was like a berry garden. So she was always picking like blueberries and strawberries and things like that. She didn't grow other types of fruit. So it was really interesting to see things like that coming through, and realizing like, oh wow, that's not just my mind coming up with it. Um, and so yeah, that's how kind of typically how most of the classes went. We would go around in the circle and say like, okay, next person, like, do you have a message for your partner that you've been paired with? And um, let's every single week we could try to see if like we could tap in and get more and more information that wasn't just about what the person looked like, but maybe kind of what message they were bringing, or kind of little quirks of their life. And I remember one of the pieces of advice that was given is that sometimes you're going to have people that haven't completely crossed over and that aren't completely happy. And typically you don't want to deliver that message if that is the case. And so that did end up happening to me. Somebody actually brought through my first grade teacher who had passed, and my mother had been friends with her before she died, and she had a pretty awful death. I won't get into the specifics of that, but she died pretty unhappy, and somebody else that was in the class brought through a negative communication from her saying like why was nobody there for me? Why was I alone? Like, this is like, people are horrible kind of communication. And I'm like, well, what was I supposed to do? Like, I was just a teenager, I believe, when she passed. And um, I remember the minister that was heading up the class at that time said, okay, like, well, thank you for delivering that message to Kristen, but please, in the future, if you know something is going to be negative, pretty much just shut it down. Like, you might say that this person is coming through and that they look like XYZ. But if they don't have something nice to say or something neutral to say, there's really no point in delivering the message. And we kind of have to put that message out to the people that are on the other side to show them like, no, you can't just say anything to anybody and think that you're going to get away with it. Like, there's still decorum, and there's still the whole concept of being polite, and uh, just this whole notion of, even if you are not in the best of spirits in the afterlife, it's not something that you can just take out on people that are still here all willy-nilly, especially when, again, I personally didn't have anything to do with this woman's passing or the end of her life being bad or anything like that. So that was a big piece of advice, was if you know there's a message coming through that could be harmful to somebody or not well received, and there's really no positive takeaway, there's no kind of closure or anything like that that could be coming through from that message, then just don't deliver it. Another piece of advice that was given was to not give communications to people just because you've received a communication. So in the mediumship classes, obviously, we were all there with the express purpose of giving those messages and finding messages for other, and receiving messages from partners. But the person teaching the class said, you may be at work, you may be in a grocery store, you may be out taking a walk somewhere, and you might have a very strong message come in. You might be able, again, once again, to see the deceased person. You might get a strong communication that they want to tell this person, the stranger that you are walking near, or one of your coworkers, a specific message. And let's say it's not even something negative, like the case that I just talked about. It's something personal. Once again, I was told not to give that message, unless it was something that was imperative, and it seemed like it was like so important that it might be affecting somebody else's life, or something like that. But there was this advice given to kind of be thoughtful and considerate about what messages you were giving and who you're giving them to, because let's say you're at work and you gave a message to your boss, or somebody that was some type of superior to you, or somebody that even was on kind of a level playing field professionally, but they maybe didn't have religion or didn't have a belief in the afterlife, or what have you. Just some people that you don't know what their actual belief systems are. It's like that could be very jarring. It could be unsettling, and it could harm you in the workplace for being the person that gave that message. You might either not be believed, or if you are believed, it's considered very unprofessional, and just in general, it could hurt your career. And for the same for giving messages to strangers, just passing people, like, going about your life. You also don't know what they're going through, what they believe, if what you might be saying to them will be met with anger or confusion or just any kind of negative response. So once again, it was, unless you feel really, really confident and really strong about the idea that like you have to be giving a message and it's, you feel intuitively that it's something that you absolutely have to be doing, the advice was to not do it. um, yeah, and so I was in those mediumship classes for a few years, and they were all mental mediumship, which is all about telepathy, which would be the clairs, the claircognizance, clairaudience, clairvoyance. But I ended up taking physical mediumship classes too, and those were really interesting. So I will get into those in another video, probably my third video of this series. So if you have any questions, please leave them down below, and I will try to answer them as best as I can. And thank you for listening today, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.